In my life, it's increasingly rare that I have time of my own, time to think. I have a Twitter account and several blogs to maintain, plus my Facebook status updates, my photo diary, my video blogs, and my podcast that I have to record. And that's the content that I create. There's also the content that I consume, not least of which are the emails that are at my inbox and all the messages on my answering machine. I was away for a week, and I had 283 emails that I had to go through.
Living in the loop, Homo Interneticus appears to be slowly drowning in a rising sea of information. But there's an even deeper change. The architecture of the web seems to encourage us to use our brains in a whole new way to digest the abundance of information. Here at MIT in Boston, 60 years ago, one scientist had an extraordinary vision of the future, how technology and the mind might work together. Vannevar Bush was involved in many of the great scientific advances of the 20th century. From designing some of the world's first computers to the development of the atom bomb. In 1945, he published an article that foretold our digital age. As we may think. This is Bush's original article, and with great insight, he described all of today's problems with information overload. At heart, he was focusing on the same problem that I'm grappling with in these archives. I'm searching through all these files associated with Bush, and they're labeled Vannevar Bush A through B, C through D, photographs, correspondence, etc. But the irony is, this isn't how Bush thought our brains worked. For example, when he thought about his Aunt Susie, he didn't think about all of the people that he knew whose names began with S. He thought about where he was when he last saw her, how she did her hair, what she smelled like, how she held her fingers in front of her when she talked, that kind of thing, and so on until he built up a picture of her. In other words, he didn't think our minds were linear. He thought they worked through association.
Bush put on the table the problem. He said, here is the scientist. Imagine our scientist. He has before him the human record. In other words, all the things which science has decided in its collective wisdom are true. How is he going to manage to work effectively with the knowledge which includes all that stuff?
Bush believed working in this associative fashion would open up the library of human knowledge to us all, liberating our minds from the constraints of linear thinking. Almost half a century later, it was this concept of linking information that was at the heart of Tim Berners-Lee's data retrieval system he called the World Wide Web.
The brain's good at doing those things, first just finding those coincidences and then building on them to find the patterns.
Berners-Lee built into the design of the web what were called hyperlinks, the ability to leap from one piece of information to another. But the question is whether hyperlinked associative thinking is good for us. In mirroring the way the brain functions, darting from subject to subject in a click, does this make us lazy and easily distracted?
I think science shows us that our brain wants to be distracted. And what the web does, by bombarding us with stimuli and with information, it really plays to that aspect of our brain. It keeps our brain hopping and jumping and unable to concentrate.
When you grow up expecting to be able to find information at a moment's notice, what does it do to your ability to internalize information?
We used to be trained in the discipline of reading and writing at length. Now the generation raised on the web's associative links seem unable to face the rigors of such linear thinking, even, it turns out, at our top universities.
What I notice about students from the first day I see them when they arrive at university is that they ask nervously, what do we have to read? And when they're told the first thing they have to read is a book, they all now groan, which they didn't used to do 5 or 10 years ago. And you say, why are you groaning? And they say, it's a book. How long is it?
Just take your own doctor. Would you be happy if your doctor simply skimmed the abstracts of Lancet and all the major databases and never read anything in detail? How happy would you be?
I happen to think that long-form reading is very important because you can learn things from long-form that you could never learn from short-form. You know, you can't read Remains of the Day and not come away with a better understanding of life regret. And those are things that you can only get in sort of book-length reading sessions.
But are these just the grumblings of an older generation? Beyond anecdotes, can we find any evidence that the web is really changing how we think? At University College London, Professor David Nicholas was the first academic to systematically study people's online behavior by analyzing millions of anonymous data records. In one survey, he found that 40% of people never revisit the same web page, that they only view up to 3 pages from the thousands that are available online.
And the really big surprise was that people seemed to be skipping over the virtual landscape. They were popping in from sites, looking at 1 or 2 pages, going to another site, looking at 1 or 2 pages, and then going on. Nobody seemed to be staying anywhere for very long.
Professor David Nicholas's study suggests that the web's hyperlinked network of information is converting us from thinking linearly into thinking associatively. These two types of thinking can be termed fox and hedgehog.
Foxes are people that embrace all kinds of ideas, like the wisdom of the crowd, bounce from here and there and pick things up, and that's how they acquire their knowledge. And then there are hedgehogs. Hedgehogs like one big idea. They repeat, they go back to the same source. These people like the peer-evaluated environment because they're certain of that. And these people represent quite a different group of people.
Now we want to find out whether the younger generations are becoming more fox-like than hedgehog. So we've joined forces with UCL in a unique experiment. Our aim is to discover the impact the web is having on our brains.
Is this test a genuine first?
Absolute first, a global first. Nobody's ever done this before. Nobody even knows what's going to come out of it.
To give us a first indication, we've brought together 100 people who represent different ages and genders. Some use the web rarely, others all the time.
Look at your screen, concentrate on what you have to do, click start, and that game will begin.
We are especially interested in the 12 and 18-year-old age groups because their brains have been formed only knowing life with the web. How does their behavior compare to people who rarely use the web and to serial users like myself?
You've got to look at the pictures, you've got to look at the numbers, you've got to look at the letters, you've got to make a decision. Is it an odd number? Is it an even number? Is it a vowel? Is it a consonant? It's a bit too much for my brain.
The results from our initial survey of 100 volunteers seem to confirm what many suspect. Generation Web seemed to display more fox-like behavior. They answered their questions after looking at half the number of web pages and only spending 1/6 of the time viewing the information than their elders did. So it seems pretty clear to me that, for good or ill, the younger generation is being remolded by the web. Facebook's feedback loops are revolutionizing how they relate. There's empirical evidence now that information overload and associative thinking may be reshaping how they think. For many, this seems to be a bleak prospect. Young people bouncing and flitting through a thoughtless, throwaway virtual world. But are we being too harsh? Are we failing to spot something valuable about this new culture?
We go on singing the old song of fragmentation and alienation because every society always looks at the preceding age while living in a new current one, never sees the age it's living in.
You might be surprised to learn that that was recorded in the 1960s, and the person who was speaking was the Canadian maverick thinker Marshall McLuhan. In 1968, McLuhan took up a year's professorship in New York. It was the perfect destination for him as he was enthralled by the hustle and bustle of modern life. He positively welcomed the kind of future that the web has now given us.